Hello. Today we are talking about a specific scientist and one of the experiments he carried out, and this has to do with ecology. So the scientist we're looking at is Robert Payne, and he was a scientist that was just starting his career in the 60s and 70s. He was a scientist from the University of Washington. And Washington has lots of rocky coastlines, just like California and Oregon. And he was researching how predators interact with the environment and their ecosystem. So researching predator impacts. So he wanted to see how they could change their environment, how they helped the environment, how they hurt the environment. These were the things that he was looking at, and he realized that near University of Washington, they had all these amazing tide pools. And these tide pools were very diverse. Realized tide pools are very diverse places with lots of living creatures. And this is just a sample of all the different types of creatures you're going to find in tide pools, but they're all in a very small space. So it's very densely populated, and you have crabs, barnacles, mussels, urchins, snails, limpets, and many different types of each of these. So just like a rainforest, you have predators, you have prey, carnivores, creatures that eat only other animals, and you're going to have herbivores too. Herbivores eating just plant material. But all these live in the same area, some eating each other, some just eating plants, but there's a whole food web. And again, it's very much like a rainforest. With all the different types of life living so closely together. So Robert Payne wanted to know what happens if you remove some of these creatures. So he focused on these large starfish. And they are, you could just call them orange starfish or purple starfish, but their scientific name is Pisaster ocraceus. Pisaster ocraceus. And these were one of the predators that are in this rocky intertidal area that you'll find in among the tide pools. And what they found out after just making observations is this was likely an apex predator. So a predator at the top. And it ate almost all the types of creatures that were in the tide pools, but mainly what it really, really loved is these mussels. There's lots of mussels all through these tide pools. And you can see an image here of the sea stars eating one of these mussels. So there's plenty of them. That's what they like. But as an apex predator, nothing was really eating the starfish. Nothing was preying on the starfish. They were preying on other things, mainly mussels. So Robert said, what happens if you remove Pisaster ocraceus from the ecosystem? Remove the top predator. Are we just going to get more of all the other different types of species? So he wanted to know, he wanted to find out what would happen. And what he did was he pried loose the starfish with a crowbar over one whole summer. So he took a crowbar out and he started removing these big starfish and then throwing them into different areas of the ocean. So he had marked out an area of the tide pools and said, okay, in this area, I'm removing all of the starfish. And as you can imagine, doing that, he's got to come back day after day to do this. And he did this for a whole summer because the starfish are going to make their way back into the tide pools that he cleared out. So he has to do this repeatedly. And eventually, over the course of the summer, he removes all these starfish from the tide pools and then just waits to see what happens year after year. And what he found was not that there would be more species or a larger population of all of the species, but what he found was after 4 years of just making observations in that same marked off tide pool, that there was only about half the number of species left. So by removing the starfish, you actually lost diversity. You lost about half the numbers, half the different types of creatures that were there. And then after 8 years, it was almost nothing but mussels. Mussels covered every square inch of that tide pool that he was looking at, out-competing every other animal. So there were no other species except for these mussels. And that was after 8 years. So what did that tell him? Well, he started to understand that these apex predators regulate the entire ecosystem. They're more important than other species in the ecosystem. So these starfish were eating the mussels and keeping the mussels from taking over the tide pools. Because without the starfish, the mussels just completely push everything out of the way. But with the starfish keep the mussel populations down. They keep them in check. And he tried this with some other species too. So he tried removing other species, not apex predators, species. And he found that it did not cause the same results. So when you removed other species, So when he removed other species, it didn't affect the population of the rest of the species there. It didn't really change things when he removed things like chitons or limpets or anemones. But the big change happened because of the apex predator, the starfish. And there's a lot more examples, and we'll probably talk about more examples of this regulation of an ecosystem. All right, thank you.